communication collaboration. Our guest this time is the teacher to talk about the silent addiction to benzos. All right, my man, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
How have things been going with you?
Things are going relatively okay. Last time I was here, I still hadn't went back to work and physical work with school. We were doing, not remote, we were doing virtual learning. I have one live classroom and the rest is virtual, and I have one remote class, but it's better than not working at all. I'm ready for life to go back to normal. I don't know when that'll ever happen again, but I'm good. I'm still doing my thing.
Cool. Well, what do you want to talk about today, my man?
Well, last time I was here, I talked a little bit about a variety of things. I talked about how people act on social media towards each other and the divisive political climate that we live in. Mm-hmm. But today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the problem with benzodiazepine addiction and just taking it in general, because, and I'm talking about nerve pills. If you don't know what benzodiazepines are, I'm talking about your Valium, your Xanax, your Klonopin, or I think that's how you pronounce it. I've taken several of those over the last, 30 years now, maybe a little over 30 years. I've been off of them for about 8 years, but I'll just tell you up front, I took benzos for 25 straight years. I might have missed one or two doses over those courses of 25 years.
Why were you prescribed?
Why was I prescribed those? Well, back in, let's just rewind back to childhood. I've always been nervous. I've always had this nervous quality about me. I had a cousin who once told me about how I interacted with my late mother. She would say I was always like tugging her and like going, Mom, Mama, 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 Mama. And I was always just worrying her to death over some little whatever, this being almost neurotic, I guess. And she passed away when I was in ninth grade, and I got through high school, I thought, relatively fine. I mean, kids are pretty good about bouncing back from tragedy or whatever. So I did fine through high school, I thought. But every once in a while, I would get this short of breath, being very nervous. I actually thought I had some kind of breathing problem. I was just not talking to anyone at home about it. And I would go through this, what I now know is a panic attack, and I would just get myself through it. And every few months, I would get that. Fast forward to college, I was working a summer job at a natural gas plant. It's pretty stressful things around there. I mean, there's a lot of, you're working with natural gas, for heaven's sake, but I was working around a lot of that. And one day out of nowhere, out at the plant where I was working at, I just had the overwhelming feeling of doom. And I started getting short of breath. My heart rate, was shooting up to over 100 because I started like counting my beats per minute. I got real obsessive with that. So I knew I was running at about 120 a minute. And so when you start doing that to your pulse with your fingers, that's not a good thing. Fear takes over because you think your heart's going to beat out of your chest and you're going to have a heart attack. So all these irrational thoughts came about.
Of course. Yeah.
Right. So
just compounds things.
It just compounded it tenfold. And
I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I ended up in the emergency room, and my doctor prescribed me a benzodiazepine. It's called Syntrax. It's no longer made. I don't know why they quit making it, but I took that, I think, for my first probably 5 or 6 years, but they quit making it. And my life was good again. I took the medicine like clockwork. I think I was taking it 3 times a day. It was a relatively low dose of a benzo, but I was taking it like clockwork. And everything was fine so long as I was on those. I won't say I quit having panic attacks, but it just got easier to get through the day. Then I switched over to UWF. I went over to a 4-year college, and I was still taking benzos 3 times a day. And going into that environment, when I first started there, I started getting real apprehensive again, even though I was taking medication. So I started upping the dose. The problem with upping a dose on your own without telling your doctor, you have to realize you only prescribed a certain amount of medication per month. So you start having to make some cuts here and there. So you start playing doctor with yourself, and I would find myself sometimes coming up short. I'd start running out of medication, and I would have to call the doctor to get another prescription. which was very tough sometimes. But I was almost able to manage it about every time to get that medication back into my system within a reasonable amount of time. There were times where I would run out for a day, which at the time, I just thought I was a nervous person. The medicines I thought, well, it's leaving my body and it's just leaving me with my natural nervousness, which I found out later once I came off of these benzodiazepines. Once I came off of them, I realized that I really wasn't as nervous as I thought I was. I was actually a functioning drug addict. But at the time, I didn't think I was. I just thought I was just a nervous person.
So your doctor never stepped in when you were calling him to get refills when you were going past what you were?
No, they would probably just say, we can't prescribe those via phone call. We can't just call it in. You're going to have to come in. So shit, I would just drive all the way up to my hometown, back to my doctor, an hour away, and I would get another prescription. So it's just something I had to do. But my doctor was my doctor for 30 years. So I just did what he told me to do. He'd say, you're probably going to be on this stuff for the rest of your life. You just have a sensitive nervous system. You just think of it as like a Briggs and Stratton lawnmower engine it's just set too high. And this nerve medication just evens you out. But you're probably going to be on this for the rest of your life, which I always thought was a bunch of horseshit. I knew there was a way to come on. There had to be a way. I didn't think it was within reach. I mean, I started looking into how could I come off of this stuff. I started looking into these like facilities I was just looking at. I'm like, God, the price is ridiculous. And the stigma of just taking this stuff, I just didn't want a lot of people to even know that I took them. And I was just looking at how could I fucking come off of this stuff? And this is like before the days of the internet. Really, I was just... Well, maybe it wasn't. By the time the internet rolled around, I was looking up, websites for people that were coming off of this medication. And there were actually there was a few facilities in the United States. I was just looking at it. It was really high priced and it just looked very daunting. I'm like, I'm just going to be a prisoner to this stuff for the rest of my life, it looks like.
Yeah, there's only two options, really, right?
Yeah.
Either tolerance or addiction.
And as time went on, as the years rolled on, as the decades rolled on, the more it felt like a monkey on my back. There were times in my life where I was going through some stress with other factors that wasn't even really just the medication. There were some things going on. Like one time I changed my job. I purposely left my teaching job and went to another school, and I just have a very hard time dealing with change, and my stress levels just went through the roof, and because it was a job change, principal change, it was just totally different. I wasn't teaching in a classroom. I was floating. They call it a floating teacher. I was going from one classroom to another, and it was just really stressful. And I purposely did that thinking I could handle it, and it was very difficult, and my stress level went through the roof, and I started overtaking the medication. There were some times where I was taking it instead of 3 times a day. It might have been 6 times a day.
Does it really help you, though?
At that point in time, when I was spiraling out of control, this is around 2007 or so, I felt like it was doing me no help. So there are time periods in my life when my stress level was so high where the benzos did next to nothing to help me out.
Gotcha.
And I just didn't know what to do. But then life would kind of even out. My stress level would kind of even back out. And I was okay so long as I was taking the medicine I think I was taking it 3 times a day. So every several hours, I would know to take it, because what would happen after, let's say I was supposed to take a dose at, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. If I didn't take it by 4 and it was 8 o'clock, I could feel it. I could physically feel myself wanting more of that. Well, what I know now is wanting that drug in my system, even though at the time I just thought it was relieving the stress that I had.
So it was more of an addiction and not helping you.
Yeah, the longer it went on, we're talking, I started taking them in 1986. Around 2007 or so, when some things had happened with me changing jobs and some other external factors with some family, some issues there. I was having with some people. I just felt it totally unmanageable, and I just knew that there's going to have to be I'm going to have to come off of this stuff one day. And it took a drastic measure for me to start thinking about coming off of them. And that was my doctor around about 2011. My doctor, I just got back from Australia, carrying students from overseas, which was stressful in itself. But that was doing that. I did that for 6 years in a row. Well, I think I took a couple of years off, but I took kids overseas, I think 6 times. And that was I think in a roundabout way, it was my way of showing my nervous system that I could handle this stuff. Even though I was taking benzos on these trips to Europe and Australia, New Zealand, and places like that, I always made sure I had those medications on my body. I always had like at least 3 days. When I was overseas, I had at least 3 days supply on me, just in case they got lost, in their luggage or whatever. And that the last time I went to Australia, my luggage was lost for like 2 days. But luckily, I had my little helper with me, my benzos with me. I had them on my body, and I was able to get through for a couple of days. But so when I came back from there, it was within a week after I got back. My doctor made the local news. He and dozens of other doctors got paid a visit by the I guess it was the feds. They came in. I guess they'd been monitoring what he was prescribing and how much he was prescribing. Not only benzos, we're talking like pain medication and things like that. And I always heard that he overprescribed, especially for pain medicines. I never was one on pain medicine, so this is just strictly a benzo issue. But he got accused of basically running a pill mill, which was... I really honestly didn't give a shit about him supposedly running a pill mill. I was just friggin' scared beyond belief that now I've got to finally deal with this addiction that he thrust upon me back in 1986. It's 2011. Now I've got to friggin' finally deal with this, because now my doctor can no longer prescribe this medication that he gave to me, and I've had as a monkey on my back for 20-something years. Now I got to find a way to deal with it, because he can literally no longer prescribe that medication. So I went to the doctor after he got busted. He was still being a doctor. When I say he was being busted, he was being investigated, basically, and he could not prescribe controlled substances until the investigation came to a close and he was exonerated from all that. By the time that happened, my ass was already gone. I was already gone to another doctor. I'd already been through several doctors by the time he was exonerated, but it still didn't change the fact that I had to find a way to deal with this, because after all of this happened with my doctor, well, he wasn't the only doctor that was really watching what they were dispensing out to patients. So I found another doctor, and this doctor would only prescribe one benzo a day, and I was taking a 3-day regimen for 20-something years, and sometimes more than 3. So there were days when I was taking, like I said, not all the time, but there were periods where I was taking 5 to 6 a day at some points in my life once I started taking them. But once he...
That's a lot of medicine.
That's a lot of fucking drugs. I mean, I look back on it now and going, how in the hell did I do that? My tolerance level was so high that I didn't even realize it. And I was drinking beer throughout most of that, on the weekends and sometimes the weekdays. There was a period where I wasn't drinking for a couple of years, but I mean, I was like mixing alcohol with benzodiazepines, and looking back on it now, it's like, shit, I mean, I should be dead.
It's a bit of a self-medication, I think. Yeah.
Right. So my doctor, he got into, like I said, he got into some hot water. So I went on to a new doctor, and they were prescribing a lot less than what my body was used to. So I said I went to a doctor. Actually, I went to a psychiatrist first, and they were giving me, I think, 1 a day, and they were trying to help me cut back on it, and I just couldn't follow the plan that they had me on too fast of a plan. It was way too fast of a plan. It was like a several week plan. I said, there is just no way I can do this. this is too much. I'm a teacher. So I didn't take off work. I continued my job as a teacher throughout this brutal cutback. It was getting very hard to keep that secret at work. There was 2 people at work I told, and my wife, who was at the same school as me during that time. They're the only people that ever knew. My principal never knew that I had this benzo problem, which I never considered it a problem until I was finally faced with it when my doctor got in trouble. So anyway, so psychiatrist prescribed them to me for a while. They changed my medication. I'd been taking Xanax for years. Mm-hmm. And they cut me back. When they did the cutbacks, they put me on another medication, the Klonopin, or whatever, however you pronounce it. They put me on that, saying that it was easier to come off of, mm-hmm. which I didn't find that. I found it much the same as the Xanax I was taking. So eventually I switched, like I said, I switched to a regular doctor's, and then I was with a psychiatrist. My regular doctor wasn't prescribing me the medication because the psychiatrist was already doing that for me.
So did you notice a difference in the way the psychiatrist treated you versus the medical doctor?
No.
Because it sounds to me like the psychiatrist was working with you on addiction, but the medical doctor was kind of working with you on your anxiety issue.
Well, the reason why I went to the psychiatrist is to try to come off of this stuff. Mm-hmm. Maybe he could find a way for me to come off of it.
Okay, so it was a targeted approach.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And look, the only thing he really did was just prescribe me the one a day. What he was doing, he would like reduce it down every few months maybe every few weeks. He might cut it down to a half a pill or 3/4 of a pill, but I just didn't find that very effective. And eventually I said, fuck it, I'm going to stay with him. He's just going to prescribe me the medication. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to just bite the bullet, and I'm going to find a way to do this. I had been researching microtapering, where you cut the medicine back a certain percentage every day. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm not good at math. I can't do that. But I can damn sure sliver it with a knife. So what I started doing, I started taking the pill, and I started making gradual cutbacks every day. There were days where I didn't make a cutback, but I would not mathematically do it. I would just sliver a little bit of the pill off, and I would keep every friggin' grain of the pill. It's not like I slivered off a little bit and tossed it in the trash. Mm-hmm. I saved every friggin' grain of pill that I slivered off. And I would just manage that every day and just take a little bit less. There were days where I said, I can't get through the day with any tapering. I'm going to have to take this amount today. And there were days, no lie, where I would have slivered a little bit off, and there were days where I would go back and take a whole pill again.
Did you ever get to a point where you were like, if I don't take one today, I can take 2 tomorrow?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Luckily, I never went to a day and not take one tomorrow, because I knew through all the experiences of my body running out, or there'd be times where I would be out of medication back when I was with my regular doctor, and it was absolute torture. And what I know now, I was just going through benzo withdrawal.
Yeah, you were addicted and didn't even know it at this point.
No, I didn't. No, yeah. I was told that I wasn't an addict. Jeff, your body is just tuned too high, and this is just evening you out. But anyway, so I was coming off the medication little by little, and it was not easy. So I really wasn't doing what the psychiatrist wanted me to do. He wanted me to take, like, let's say a whole pill a day, or 3/4 of a pill a day, or a half a day. I'm like, that ain't working. So that's when I started slivering a little bit off, but I was not just taking, when I said I was taking one a day, I would spread that dose throughout the day. So I might have been taking, I might have been breaking that pill up into 4s and kind of micro tapering every day, just slivering a little bit off of each one. So that's what I failed to tell you earlier. I was actually breaking the pill up and slivering a little bit off of each one throughout the day and managing it that way, because I'm like, I just can't just take one pill a day because my nerves can't handle it. I've got to take just a little bit of that pill because I only have that one pill. And I also have got to fight several things now. I got to fight my mind because I was so used to taking 3 a day, and now I've got to deal with 1 a day, and now I've got to cut back on it, and I'm going to have to break that dose up till almost like I was taking when I was taking 3 pills a day, except now I'm dealing with 1 pill. Mm-hmm. Now I've got to break it up into several doses. So I was doing that. I was playing doctor and psychiatrist, and I can't believe I was even doing that because I'm crazy anyway.
I assume you took these pills orally?
Yeah, I took them orally. Yeah. And I've seen, since I've gotten off of these things, I've seen people micro taper and they do the math. They take a 1 1/100th of a dose at this point in time. I'm like, I don't understand all that, but they will like do that and they will break the dose up and they will mix it with water and shoot a syringe into their mouth. I never got that complicated with it. I just slivered it off and just grinned and bared it for about a year. It was not good at home. I can't believe my wife even kept me in the house during that point in time because I was so unpredictable. Because I was having so many symptoms, and I was not a happy camper. I was probably verbally abusive at some points. I was just not myself. I was very quick-tempered and saying things I shouldn't have said, and some of that still has a residual effect with us. There are times where she brings up how I was during that time and how she stuck with me, and I can't thank her enough for what she did with me through all of that. But
I've always had a problem with depression.
Oh, me too.
Those closest to me know that I used to be really bad. I used to have a real bad problem with depression.
Well, with anxiety, depression and anxiety go hand in hand, and I'd been on and off of antidepressants for years. There were years where I wouldn't take them. I would take things like St. John's wort back when the whole herbal thing was coming out in the 80s and 90s. I'd go to the CVS and buy some St. John's wort, and there's no telling what they were cutting that stuff with. But I was taking that, but I was still taking benzos too. But I've always had a problem with depression from especially college. After I lost my mom, and then once I got about 19, I really went through a deep, dark, depressive tunnel there. But that was before I was taking benzos. But about a year later, I got on the benzos, and that kind of brought me out of some of the depression. And I wasn't taking antidepressants for a long time. I was just taking the benzos. Fast forward to 2020, now I've been taking this same antidepressant for years. It's Wellbutrin, which is originally used to treat smoking for people that smoke, to cut them back. But it's always been, they've said it's been a good antidepressant tool too. So it's been the only antidepressant that I could actually handle. The serotonin.
SSRI?
Yeah, I can't even say that. But the medications like Zoloft, those type medications just did not work for me. They had a lot of side effects. They watered me down. They made me really, I thought, antisocial. I was just kind of operating. I was not really in the driver's seat. I was just kind of just there, and I just knew that wasn't in the way either. And I'm still, years later, I'm still on the Wellbutrin. I refuse to go to another medication right now because...
How long have you been on the Wellbutrin?
Wellbutrin, I've probably been on Wellbutrin about 6 years. Yeah, I think I got on this stuff right after I got off the benzos. I'm on a real low dose right now, and because if I get on any higher of a dose, I can't sleep at night. But that's what I'm dealing with. I'm off benzos. It took me micro dosing with my own self doing it for about a year. It just got so irrational when I was going through all of this. There was a time I was over, we were doing some Christmas shopping, and we were in separate vehicles. My wife was in one car and I was in the other, and she had ridden over there with a group of people, I think, and I was by myself that day. So going back home that day from the shopping center, all of a sudden had a panic attack. And that's the thing that I've always had when I was on benzos. Even though they were helping me, I would have panic attacks. Even taking the benzos, I was having panic attacks.
Were they as drastic as when you wouldn't take the benzos, though?
they would get really bad if I was going through a real hard time. And when you're coming off benzos, well, hell, you're going through a hard time every fucking day. And that one day I had this panic attack and I was by myself. And when you're having a panic attack and you're by yourself, your mind goes in a million different directions. And I called my wife, and she basically walked me through that panic attack the whole way back. And it was like a 30-mile trip back home. And
Wow.
I didn't think I was going to make it back alive. I really didn't think I was going to make it back. My heart was going through the roof. I couldn't breathe. And I'm thinking I'm having a heart attack when I know good and well it's just I'm a drug addict. Even though I don't want to admit it, I've become a drug addict. And even though that wasn't the intention. And so I found my body was just coming off of this stuff, and I was having these panic attacks that just got worse and worse. They became more prevalent as I was trying to wean myself off of it. But this is what I found out. Once I got off the medication, I haven't had a panic attack, a full-fledged panic attack. There were some times where I was getting there, and I'm like, don't go there. Mm-hmm. Don't put your friggin' fingers on your pulse, on your wrist. Don't do it. Mm-hmm. Don't think about your heart rate. Mm-hmm. And now, I don't even think of my heart rate. If my heart rate's up exercising or whatever I'm doing, I don't even think about it anymore. I don't. I used to put myself into that spiral. I would spiral out of control, putting my fingers. There were times I would put my fingers on my pulse, on my wrist so much that I could feel where I had put my fingers because I'd been doing it all day. So it was starting to hurt. That's crazy.
You know what? I just had a revelation here, because I saw you do that a few times back in middle school.
Yeah.
And now hearing you talk about that.
Serious?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I remember you doing that. Well, look,
dude, during that time period, I would say to some of my friends there, do you have your little, we'd shake our pill bottles. Like, we'd have a container with our medication in it. It'll get us through the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. There were times at work where I would have a panic attack, but you've got to keep it from your students. You got to keep it from your cohorts. Yeah. And you're going to have your little meltdown, and you're going to get through it. And you always get through it. Even with a panic attack, even though when you're going through one, you think the world's ending and you're going to die.
Yeah.
You know that you're going to get through this because you've only been through a million of these.
Yeah, a million, yeah.
And it's going to subside. Your heart rate's going to come back down. So that's what would always happen. But yeah, I was definitely
in the moment, though. You can't be told that.
You're not in the moment. You're so not comprehending so much stuff because your mind is going in a million different directions. And the only thing you want is that feeling to go away, that impending doom that you're having.
I noticed you used the term "mother's little helper" earlier.
Right. Well, yeah, I've always loved the Stones, but sort of.
Would that lend any credence to how long benzos have actually been around?
Right.
Though? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they go back. I think they date back to the 1960s, and
and they're still alive and well today, correct?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, shit. If anything, right now people are taking them more than ever before. I think I had read that. I think it was from like 1996 to 2013. Benzo prescriptions went from like 8 million prescribed to 14 million prescribed in that less than a 20-year period, I guess. I mean, that was just crazy. And I know it's only gotten worse since then. But going back to the Stones song, Mother's Little Helper, well, if you don't know about that song, it's about a mother taking her nerve pill to get her through the busy day. And yeah, doctor, please. How does that lyric go again? I'm getting old. Yeah. Well, anyway, make a long story short, it's about a mother and her benzo addiction, the monkey that she now has on her back. And I really didn't look at it as a monkey until I found myself either without it. There was a time when, before I went overseas, I was at LAX at the airport getting ready to board to go to Australia. And I had my backpack. I'm like, God damn, where's my backpack at? I found it like hundreds of yards away. No one had picked it up, thank God. My medication was in that bag, and luckily I found it, or my ass wouldn't have been going. And that would have been an embarrassing story to tell, that now I'm going to have to go back to my hometown because I can't make that trip because I'm out of medication.
Yeah,
and my
you
body
know,
can't handle that. That would have been a nightmare.
that's crazy too, because I just had another connection that not only are you dealing with the issue that you have that you were prescribed the medication for, but you're also dealing with the addiction itself. So it's almost like if one thing's not leading you around by a leash, the other thing is, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'm feeling good today, but I can't get too far away from my medication.
Yeah, it was a whole new set of problems come in with taking this, because you're worried about running out, and or if you've doubled up one day and you got to make a cut back before the end of the month or whatever, because you've been prescribed 90 pills and you got to get through a month with 90 pills, was 3 times a day, I think. And you've had a stressful week or two and you had to like increase your dose. And so you're dealing with all these other problems that you didn't think you would ever have to deal with. Like, I'm out of medication. So I'm almost out of medication. So I'm going to have to make some cutbacks to get through the end of the month until I can get a new prescription. But there were times where I would run out and I was able to finagle my way and get another one. That's before the feds put the clamp down on the doctors. I guess it's harder to get them now than it used to be. I don't think they prescribe them in the amount that they were doing it at the time where I was taking them, where I was taking 3 a day. I think those days are long gone now, and because doctors love their livelihood and they don't want to lose their livelihood. But what's happening with it, what's going on with doctors, I think this whole time they prescribe this medication, but they don't know how to get the patient off of them once they get them on it. So in my case, I was on them for 20-something years, and the doctor's telling me a crock of shit, telling me that I could never come off of them, that my body is just naturally tuned too high, and I'm probably going to be on this for the rest of my life. So he's just giving me this fake-ass story. His real dilemma was, and this is before he got in trouble, I mean, his dilemma was, I got this patient hooked. So I've got to keep him hooked. I've got to, because he can't come off of it, because it's going to be hell if he tries to come off of it. Well, what happened when he got in trouble, I was just left with, I've got to find a way to come off of it, because he couldn't prescribe them anymore.
I've never had a problem with pills. I've self-medicated with other substances, of course, but...
Well, I didn't look at it as self-medicating. I looked at it, well, I'm taking this like clockwork, and I say I take it like clockwork. Yeah, there were some times where I had to make some cuts here and there or make some additions to my dosage, and that's me playing doctor, but that's what I did to get through the monkey on the back that he got me on for all these years. And I say that, I still love this doctor. He's a friend of the family, but I still have this, as much as I respect him, and he's gotten some of my family through a lot of tough times, and he saved my dad several times from dying.
Do you think he knew that the addiction was as serious it was at the time that he started prescribing?
Yeah, I don't know. He had to have. I mean, shit, he was prescribing pain pills too, not to me, but
yeah,
he had to know that he gave these people this wretched monkey, and they could not shake it loose. And I know there had to be dozens of other people that were in the same friggin' boat as me. I had to think, my ass is going to come off of this finally now. There's no more dreaming about coming off of this and looking at some website of some facility in Arizona or wherever where people come off of this stuff in this holistic environment. I'm going to have to fucking come off of this stuff as a middle school teacher. And I'm just going to have to come off of this stuff one way or the other. And that's what I did. I microtapered for about a year with the help of a psychiatrist, but with his ridiculous methods weren't working. So I had to, like I said, I had to microtaper, sliver here and there, until finally my body was able to just kind of every day was a battle, but eventually I saw light at the end of the tunnel. I was feeling less stressed as I was coming off of it. Eventually I was able to not be on them. There was a time where I felt stressed after I got off of them. I took another one. My dog had been prescribed benzos. And I'm like, well, there's a novel way to get some benzos when I need it. But luckily I didn't go that route, but there was always some backup if I needed it. And
yeah.
So I took one of my dog's benzos, and it was just human Valium is all it was. And I took that after stuff had gotten out of my system, and it made me higher than a damn kite.
Wow.
Which was scary because prior, when I was on benzos, they never made me high. They just evened me back out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, God damn, I took this benzo and it gave me a sensation of being high, and that's not what I'm looking for here. And that scared me because I'm like, here I was, I took these things for 25 years like clockwork and then some, drinking, drinking like people drink, socially drink, and then, you might be weekend warrior at time. There were times where I was drinking a lot, on the weekends. This is prior to me coming off of benzos, mind you. There was in the 90s, I was just pounding beers down all the time with friends. They were doing their band practice, and we were going through several 12 packs a night. I'm saying that knowing that I was drinking like a fish at one point in my life and taking 3 to 4 benzos on top of that. Yeah. And then I start, now I'm years removed from benzos, and I'm seeing some of the people that I looked up to as musicians, just they die, and then I find out that they had benzos in their system. People like Chris Cornell from Soundgarden, Audioslave, and I know he committed suicide, but then they found benzos in his system. Tom Petty, just looked up to that guy, not more than a musician, and he had benzos in his system. And I know he had a hip problem, but he was taking medications, and his problem was more of an opioid problem, but there were benzos in his system too, and that couldn't have helped matters. So I'm seeing people like the Pettys and the Cornells, and I'm not sure if Prince had benzos in his system. He probably did.
I wonder about Robin Williams.
You see, these people are, they're medicating themselves with pain medication, opioids, and then they're probably having this edge because their nervous system is just out of whack, and they're taking, the doctor probably prescribed them a benzo to even things out, and it really doesn't even anything out. Your body becomes so addicted to this medication. I can't even explain the feelings that I was having. I mean, I can run through some of the sensations I was having. It was absolute crazy shit. When I was weaning myself off of this medication, this is not when, I'm not talking about the days when I was taking it and I would run out. I'm talking about when I was actually coming off of this stuff and weaning myself off. I was having vibration feelings. Like my body vibrated. I mean, I literally thought my body was vibrating internally. Mm-hmm. It was like having a jackhammer sensation in your body. I was having spider web sensations, like I was going through like a haunted house with spider webs in it. My skin was just tingling, and it was just the craziest ass feeling. And here I am at school teaching I think I was teaching 6th grade at this particular time. And there was just times where I didn't know if I was going to keep a lid on it. And I know some of my students probably saw just the crazy side of me because they didn't know I was coming off benzos, but I could not miss work. I was not going to go to some facility. I'm going to do this shit on my own. And here I am teaching friggin' social studies and to a bunch of little crazy 6th graders, and then I got this crazy teacher that's a functioning drug addict.
By fire.
Yeah. I can't let people know this because there's such a stigma with mental health anyway.
Yeah, no, you're right about that.
And it still is. Yeah. I mean, there still is. There was friggin' 25, 30 years ago, and there is now. When people think that you're taking nerve pills and you're taking 3 a day like clockwork, they're going to think you're crazy anyway. But that was normalcy to me for so long that when I came off of this stuff, I'm dealing with several problems now. I'm coming off of a medication physically, but my brain is telling me you can't do that because you're taking this amount and you got to take this certain amount. And so you're going to have to pretend this one pill you're taking is 3 now. So you have this whole other crazy mania
signals
going on.
Yeah.
I'm so far removed from it now. I wish I'd have done a podcast on this right after I came off of it because it's so fresh, but I don't have panic attacks anymore. Like I said earlier, I don't pay attention to my heart rate much anymore. I know when my heart rate's up, but I don't worry about it anymore. I just don't have that same set of mania that I had back then. So, it's not as fresh on my mind anymore. I'm like almost a different person now when I look at that point in time. Here's the only thing, though. Not the only thing, but I was a different person when I was on them. As horrible as it sounds when I was taking them, I was more of a social person. Now being off of this medication, I don't know what it did to me, but I'm just more introverted now. I don't want to be around people as much anymore. And definitely tie it to benzos. It had to have done something to me to where
That's weird, though, because you think it might be the other way around.
yeah, you would think that.
You know,
But
people get into the depths of addiction. They start getting real reclusive and...
yeah, you're right. Yeah, you would think that I would have been more reclusive, taking the medication. But I was actually more of a chatty person when I was on them, and my wife has pointed that out to me many times, and I don't falter for that. She said that I was a much more loving person when I was on them, and now she wasn't saying that you should get back on them. She saw the hell that I went through coming off of them because I gave her enough hell. The hell that I was dealing with internally, there was enough of it that spewed out of my mouth and my eyes that it's permanently altered our relationship in a lot of ways, because I'm not saying she should let me not ever hear from that. She should tell me the hell that she went through with me coming off of that, because she paid a price for it mentally, and my stepkids too. I know they had to, because they saw the horrible my friggin' dogs. I mean, I'm sure they saw a horrible side of me too. I mean, yeah, I was not nice to them either, and I look back on that going, God, I was like friggin' Jekyll and Hyde. There were times where I would lock myself in the bathroom, where a lot of men do, to get away from everything. But there were times where I would just lock myself in the bathroom just to deal with the mania that I was dealing with, because I didn't want people to see it. I didn't want the people that was in my life daily, my wife and kids, stepkids, to see me go through that, even though they did see some things. Like if I was really going through a horrible moment and my heart rate's going through the roof, I'm having these sensations of not only impending doom, but the creepy crawlies on my skin and my ears ringing beyond belief. I mean, my ears have rang all my life, every day. My mom had some kind of ear problem when she had me, and she had ear problems up until she died back when I was a teenager. But I inherited some of that from her, I think, in utero. So my ears have always rang. But going through the benzo withdrawal, my ears rang tenfold. It was just the decibel level inside my head was just ear piercing. And when I was going through a lot of that, I would be in the bathroom going through it and just dealing with it, But so if I was almost needing another dose, all these sensations that I've been talking about were coming on me even more until I got the next dose in me, which would lessen it some. So I never was stress-free when I was going through the cutbacks on my benzos. But I was always looking forward to the next dose, where I would get a brief reprieve from the skin crawling sensations and stuff. So it would just taking a little bit, here and there during the day would at least alleviate some of that. But the goal was to come off of it, and which is what I eventually was able to do.
Awesome. Do you think you're in a better place now?
Yeah, so like I said, so many years have been removed from it now. I went through a lot of mania for for several decades. Gosh, I'm almost out of medication. When I'm saying I'm almost out of medication, it's 2:00 and I'm jonesing for my next dose of medication at 4, and I think I'm going to take it at 2:00 because I'm kind of stressed out. I'm going to take it 2 hours early, which meant if I was going to take it at night, I was going to have to deal with coming off of it in the later afternoon hours up to early evening. Now I'm dealing with it again, because I normally would take it again about 10 o'clock at bedtime, but now I'm starting to jones again at 8 o'clock. So I was dealing with all these friggin' manias on how to schedule medication and how to deal with my crazy ass feeling weird from one week to the next or one day to the next. And it was just becoming so unmanageable. My life was so unmanageable. And
how is it on your liver and stuff like that?
I get my blood checked for all kinds of different things every several months. I should say several times per year, so every several months. My numbers are still good on my kidneys, and my liver numbers are good too. Last I looked, which is scary. I mean, I have siblings we're all showing our age to a degree, but my older siblings their kidney function is really, really low. It scares the hell out of me, but yeah, medication will damage the hell out of you. Yeah, so you're right. My numbers are okay right now, but I don't know how much longer that's going to if that's the case. And I still take medications, so I'm not medication free.
Mm-hmm.
I'm benzo free.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I still take a host of other medications, including an antidepressant and blood pressure and whatnot. But I don't know if time will be on my side, which is a whole nother Rolling Stones song there. Yeah, so I wonder how will this stuff limit my livelihood, which is my life on this earth, or my quality of life. I wonder what kind of toll this medication has taken on my life. Not just benzos, but medication in general. Yeah.
So do you have a problem with big pharmaceutical?
Well, I just know that, that's a big money-making racket in itself. And, you got these people that work for the pharmaceutical reps, and they go to these doctors to plug their latest and greatest medication. And the doctor, I don't know what kind of kickbacks they get on all that, but,
That was the point I was trying to
make, and I'm sure they get kickbacks on it. But I think finally the ugly stain of benzos has reared its ugly head, because the feds finally caught on to a lot of it, and the feds busted my doctor back in 2011, and they raided it like he was in a meth lab or something. It was all over the news. And it wasn't just him. It was all over. There were other doctors going through the same thing, and here in town and other towns in Florida, and their gravy train was coming to an end. And I don't know. I don't even know how that works now, because I'm so far removed from taking benzos. I still have friends that take benzos. I don't ask them what their dosage is or how many they get per month or whatever, but it can't be the same amount that I was getting. Like I said, I was getting 90 a month, which is a 3-a-day supply dose for a month. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I was getting a 3-month supply, which that was a friggin' boatload of medication that I was having to manage. And when you have a lot of medication like that, you have a license in your own brain to play doctor and say, well, I'll take like I said earlier, I'm going to take an extra one today, or I'm going to take an extra half a day, until you run out of medication at the end, if you're not resourceful and you're not trying to taper a little bit until you can get some more medication. So
right.
It's just another, it just creates so many other issues, mental issues of, how to deal with things. And basically you're just a drug addict, and for all intents and purposes is what I found out. Once I came off of it, I was nothing but a drug addict.
And it's crazy. You had actually made a connection earlier before we started talking on the podcast about how opioid addiction is widely talked about, and everybody knows a lot more about it nowadays because it's starting to come more to light. But the whole benzo addiction kind of goes by the wayside. Like, you don't know about it unless you were part of it.
Because I think more people take benzos than what is let on. I guarantee if you polled a group of 20 friends and associates, I guarantee you out of 20 people, at least 5 of those, or maybe even more, have either had experience taking them or they take them right now. And it's our little helper that gets us through the day. And I think that's one reason why it's not out there like the opioid crisis. I've seen some of those documentaries. It's absolutely crazy, some of the stuff families go through with that. Because with opioid crisis, people lost their jobs and lost their families and lost their livelihoods. Benzos are a little bit different because they kind of doctor you, and they kind of pad you into this feeling of, well, I'm going to get back to normal here. It just kind of just evens you out, so to speak. And even though I was finding out in the end, it really wasn't. And when I started coming off of them, I knew that I had a damn problem that I had to lick. And it was not going to be easy to come off. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do in my life at that particular point in my life. It was the absolute hardest. I've dealt with death, with parents dying, one dying when I was young. I thought that was rough. This was rougher than any of that. It was way rougher. I can't even explain what a nightmare it was to even do. But I would not have done this had my doctor not gotten in trouble. Even though my wife was always on me about changing doctors. I'm like, he's been my doctor for friggin' almost 30 years. He knows what's best, and, I'm going to do what he tells me to do. I was real headstrong about it, and she was like eye-rolling me about that. You need to get a new doctor. This is 21st century. There's got to be a way, because she knew I was dealing with addiction before my doctor even got in trouble, because there were times when I would run out, or there were times where I might have gotten into a fight with one of my siblings or whatever, and things were starting to spiral out of control with that a little bit. My own mania, or I changed jobs, and it was just really, really tough. And she knew I was dealing with a lot with this medication, and she wanted me off of it long before I wanted to be off of it. And actually, I didn't want to be off of it until my doctor got me. Well, I said I didn't want to be off of it. I knew I just didn't have it in me to try to come off of it until the rug was pulled out from under me, when I had to finally...
You were forced to.
Well, I had to at least cut back to 3 to 1 a day, and this was life-changing. I'm going to have to do something. Either I'm going to have to stay on 1 for the rest of my life, 1 a day, or I'm going to come off this shit. And I made the decision to come off of it. And when I made that decision, there was no looking back. That's when I started, and I got the knife out. I think I might have gotten a razor blade out, too. I think I did. And I was just making, or it might have been a box cutter. I think it was a box cutter, which is a razor blade. And I was just making little cuts every day on, several times a day, just slivering it. But once I made that decision, I never looked back. Even though there were days where I did not make the cut, eventually I was able to come off of it. And now I look back on it going, how in the hell did I ever get myself in this fix? Even though I didn't get myself in this fix, a doctor chose to put me on this because he thought it was the best thing. And maybe he had the best intentions in the world, but my life was so tied to that medication for so fucking long. I mean, let's say I was out with friends or whatever. Let's say I was 2 towns over at a bar or whatever, but I forgot my medication. All of a sudden, that me not having the medication on me became a stressor in itself,
right,
which led to panic,
right,
and all these other agoraphobic type feelings.
Right.
And there were times where I couldn't even get over it. I could barely get over, like out where we live, out in this area of town. There's a bridge that eventually goes to the beach. There's the 3 Mile Bridge, which is currently out again, but another story. But there were times, and I lived over where I used to have to cross that bridge daily, and I found it very difficult to even get over the bridge. And that was these phobias that were setting in and it was all because of the benzos, man. It was crazy. And I was taking benzos, and I was still having a hard time getting over that bridge because it was so long. It was a 3 Mile Bridge, and I would start getting panicky by the time I got to the middle of the bridge. Anyway, long story short, I was just developing a bunch of phobias. And it's all a result from taking that medication, and because I was tied to it. Even though I might have had it on my possession at the time when I was going over a bridge, I still had phobias even though I was taking medication. So my anxiety never really left me even though I was taking the medication. And talking years later after being off of them, I still have anxiety, but I don't have panic attacks anymore. I still have anxiety, but I can keep it at bay now. And I'm just here today because there's so many more people like me that are on these things, and they can't find their way out of not taking that medication. I have a sibling who doesn't understand what I went through. She just tends to think that people are okay when they're on that medication, and it's beneficial. And I understand that to a point. From what I've read and heard, doctors are only supposed to prescribe these medications for no more than 2 or 3 weeks. After that, your body becomes a slave to it. It does. You're going to need more as time goes on, and they're going to say, okay, well, we're going to increase your dose now because your body is, this is the way it is, and we're going to increase it.
Tolerance now.
Yeah, well, they're not telling you that. They're just telling you, well, we're going to increase it to now 2 to 3 a day, and that's what happened with me. I think I was taking 1 and 2 and then 3, and it eventually ended up as 3 a day, but on the prescription bottle it said 3.
Well, that's a vicious cycle too. The parentheses pill cycle, trying to get you on the right medication and the right dosage of medication. And that can mess you up too, man. It really can.
Yeah. Well, the 3 a day was the one that was set through most of my time taking that. From probably the first year I was taking them until my doctor got the knock on the door from the feds, it was 3. And then some on those days or months when I was having just major mania and just major anxiety. Now, when I said I had major anxiety, I didn't have the side effects I was having as much. When I was coming off of it, that's when the ear ringing and the skin crawling and the hovering sensation and the vibration sensations I was having. That was all stuff that was new to me once I came off of it. You know, when I needed it, when I needed the fix a little more on certain other days, back before I came off of it, I would just have anxiety. It would just be my mood level would be a lot less tolerant to a lot of things, and I would be more irritable. I would be just like addicts do. You know, when an alcoholic needs more alcohol, they're going to get more in them where their nerves will calm down. So I was just needing more of the drug, I was finding out. And if I can get off of this stuff by myself, you can get off of it. The wonderful person doing this podcast here, if he has these listeners, there's got to be a base of those listeners that take this medication, because I know that a lot of people take it. And there might be some people that just take it when they so-called need it, and they don't take it like clockwork like I did. And they still probably don't know how that they can just not have that in their system and reach for it. You can come off of it. There is hope. And I'm on several support groups on Facebook. I never used those. I never knew about those Facebook support groups until after I came off of them. I never even thought about looking for those kind of groups on Facebook. But once I got off of them, I joined some of those groups, and I've seen a lot of people that were in my shoes and worse. Man, there are people way worse than I was. I mean, where they can't even function in life. I mean, I was able to keep my job, and my marriage somehow stayed intact throughout all of that. Not to say I didn't have a whole lot of other problems, which might be a whole nother podcast for another day. But one thing I found out in my life, that once you beat an addiction, there's something else there's some other underlying issue too. Mm-hmm. So yeah. So I've dealt with several things through life where I've traded one for another, I think. But
right.
Yeah. So currently I'm doing fine, and I'm sorry for people that I've hurt. I can't even imagine the people I hurt being on this stuff and showing my ass when my tank was running low on this stuff, and I needed that fix. And I sound like a seedy drug addict talking about this now, but at the time I wasn't even thinking about being a drug addict. I was doing what the doctor told me, and I was taking it somewhat as prescribed. Like I said, there were times where I did have an overage on the dose, but I was just taking it for the most part as prescribed. But coming off of it, I was just Jekyll and Hyde. I think it really altered some of my relationships with people. It really, really did, and that's what's going to happen coming off of this stuff. You're gonna go through a lot of stuff, and I don't do what I did and do it on your own. I don't recommend that. It can be done, but it's going to be at great cost.
Yeah.
With people that you might have hurt, and things that might have been said, or the way you looked at somebody, or your demeanor. I mean, I highly recommend finding somebody that can help you through it reasonably. I'm talking micro tapering. I'm not talking about breaking your pill up into fourths and taking a fourth this time and a fourth. I'm talking about like cutting back a sliver at a time, which is going to take math skills too, which I don't have the patience for. I'm sure there's probably an app for this shit now, but this documentary I was watching on CNN, it's Lisa Ling. It's on a different topic every week, but the benzo one was really awakening. Watching it made me feel dirty. It made me feel like a drug addict, even though Lisa Ling had good intentions and it was a well-made documentary. It showed what a problem I had, even though I wasn't really thinking of myself as a drug addict. It really drove home the point of, damn, I was just a damn drug addict, for all intents and purposes. And it came with great cost.
Legal addiction.
It was legal. It was a legal drug addiction. Yeah. It really, really was. And
hey, I got to ask you, have you ever seen that interview with Tom Cruise where he was talking about those psychosomatic drugs? Man, you need to see that, because he is going off. And again, at the time, everybody was like, that's just some Tom Cruise Scientology bullshit.
Well, what do you mean by psychosomatic drugs?
Well, I forget exactly who he was talking about, but they were talking about another celebrity, female celebrity, who had been prescribed some sort of drug. I can't remember the name of it either. I forget what she was prescribed. But Tom Cruise was just going off on the interviewer. He's like, do you know how bad this stuff is and this, that, and the other? But what specifically I'm thinking about is how everybody thought he was just being crazy, Tom Cruise,
Yeah.
Scientology crazy. But now that I hear you talking about this, it makes me think how close maybe he was to being right on, having his finger right on the point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, yeah. I think a lot of I think I had a boss who was the original principal of my school. He was in the Church of Science, and I don't think he took very many medications because of his beliefs. So I kind of understand, as much as I have a disdain for Tom Cruise these days, really do. But what you're saying he was talking about, I think he had some valid points, because
I'll have to find that interview for you.
Because your mind is so powerful. It's so powerful. And once you start doing something it's a ritual every day, it becomes part of your life. It's hard to kick. It's just, it's psychosis times a friggin' million. The stuff I went through, I just wish I could almost relive it to understand it again, because I've got about 7 or 8 years from it now. But goddamn, it was a tough time. I didn't know how bad my body was addicted to something like that. I just did not realize it. It scared the hell out of me. I can't believe I didn't die, because, not to say I misuse other drugs, but throughout growing up, in college and whatnot, growing up, and I had my fair share of marijuana and alcohol. I just can't believe I didn't die from it. It's a good thing I didn't take pain pills. I took pain pills as prescribed for certain things when I would have surgery and whatnot, but I never liked pain pills because it made me feel like absolute shit. But I'm glad I didn't build up a tolerance for that, because that might have been the end of me. Mm-hmm. Because I look at people like Tom Petty and Chris Cornell, they were dealing with a lot of issues. I know that Petty was dealing with severe pain. He was trying to finish up a tour and trying to get through it, and taking his opioids and his pain patches and taking his antidepressant and his benzos on top of that. I mean, he's gone. And
yeah. I know when I got my finger caught in the table saw, they gave me a prescription for 65 Percocet. And I know this isn't benzo, but just the way the doctors deal with this stuff. I ended up getting 3 separate prescriptions, 65 each Percocet. Wow. And I went in on the last one, got my stitches pulled out, and the doctor goes, well, do you need a prescription for any more Percocet? And I looked straight at him and said, don't give me any more prescription. If I get another prescription, we're going to have a problem. But the thing about that story is the doctor he was never like, do you have a problem right now? Is there an issue? I mean, he was just like, oh, okay, I don't know if he's addicted now, but I'm not going to ask any questions,
And that was a point I was bringing up earlier. These doctors, they prescribe it, but they don't know how to effectively deal with a patient that's now hooked on it. Like I said, my doctor, for friggin' 25 years, he had me on it. And there were times when I would bring up, doctor, I would love more than anything to be off this medication. I know you would, but I just don't think I just think your nervous system is just turned up high naturally, and there's nothing you can help, and this will only benefit you, and I just don't see you ever coming off of this. When in effect, I think that was his way of dealing with me being addicted to it, just by telling me the lie that I'm going to be on this for the rest of my life, which I found out is a crock of shit, because I don't feel the need for that ever again. There have been times where I could have been prescribed that again, and I'm like, the first thing I tell a doctor is, don't ever prescribe me benzos, because I don't want to ever go there again and get caught up into that cycle ever again. And that's one of I've changed doctors several times for various reasons. One of them, I moved, and so I went back to my hometown where that same doctor was that got in trouble. He's still practicing medicine. He's still there, but I'm now back in that office again and another doctor who is about my age, is a guy I went to high school with. And I told him from the get-go, and he already knew about the doctor that got in trouble because he was a coworker. I said, dude, I was on benzos for 25 years. I said, don't ever prescribe me those, because it was hell after Dr. So-and-so got in trouble. I said, I went through literal hell coming off of that. I put my wife through so much hell. It took me a year to come off of that. Don't ever prescribe me that, ever. Just if I'm ever, don't ever do it. He was very general about all that. He didn't say anything bad about the doctor or whatever. But I trust this doctor. He seems to be more 21st century than the doctor I had, even though he's in his 50s. He seems a little bit more progressive to be in a small town. So yeah, I go back. I drive an hour and a half to the doctor, but I chose to do that, and I'm satisfied with my doctor right now. But if you're being prescribed a benzo, don't take it any more than 2 weeks, because you will eventually become enslaved to it. You really, really will. And I'm sure it's that way with anything. I'm sure pain pills, it's the same thing, I'm sure. And it's the same cycle that people get into.
Well, I know what just surprised me was the correlation to the celebrities who have been passing away that are on benzos as well. That's crazy, man.
Yeah. I mean, I know that I don't think the benzos caused Chris Cornell to hang himself, but
probably didn't help, though.
It probably didn't help. And his wife has made the case regarding the benzos. I know I don't know the whole story, but I know she's made a big to-do about some of this, because he had been normal. Like we had talked earlier, I think he had been more normal there for a while. And
he'd been clean, yeah.
He'd been clean, and then he had been on the benzos, and he kind of backslid. I don't know how that happened, but I just don't know how a doctor can prescribe a medication knowing that it just alters your brain like it does. I mean, I think my brain is still healing 7 years later. I think I'm permanently a different person because of it. I really think it changed my chemical makeup to a degree. I'm just not the same. I mean, I'm kind of almost content being this way, but it really affects a lot of other people. I'm almost content being a hermit. Yeah. I really am. But
nowadays, yeah.
Yeah, it's really been beneficial here lately.
Yeah.
But at least I feel somewhat normal now. Being with this COVID stuff going on, I did go back to work in March. I don't even know when I started back, actually, but no, wait a minute. I forgot. It's been so much shit that has happened. So that's right. We got out in March, and we were doing like remote teaching, but not really remote. We were just, I was just basically giving out work online, and the kids were doing, and it was pretty much of a joke. But anyway, we went back to us regular work when in August. I was back at my job again for the first time since March, but my teaching had changed as far as how I taught. I was only going to teach one class in the classroom, and then there was going to be one remote class, which is on a computer talking to your kids, and the rest was going to be virtual. Well, that doesn't help my my hermit behavior that I have. I almost long for my regular teaching job where I was in class with a different period every hour, and teaching was never boring for me. When I was regular teaching, it was a different opportunity every period that I had, every like first, second, third period. It was a different makeup for every period, different kind of student. I had a different kind of relationship with every period, and I don't have that right now. It's kind of strange. So I'm almost looking forward to going back to a regular way of teaching, because I'm almost tired of being hermitized. So I guess that's a good thing. So yeah, I'm tired of being stuck in my classroom all day. There are days where I don't talk to any student except via text or on the telephone, and it's almost like an office job. So that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother podcast. But
interesting times we're in.
Yeah, it's just a stressful time. It's just a lot going on. People's stress levels got to be at the breaking point on a lot of different aspects, and I think that's probably why the benzo issue hasn't gone away because I'm off of them. It's probably only worse, even though they're probably being prescribed on a lesser amount per what people get for their dose or whatever. They're probably not getting 90 in a bottle for a month, 3 a day. But who knows? Maybe they are. I mean, this is a big ass country, and we're not all in Florida. I'm sure there are some states that aren't quite as. They kind of got really tightened down under Governor Scott, and I'm sure and I don't mind that. They needed to be, and because it was really getting out of hand. I mean, apparently, and there were doctors that were prescribing way too much. I do think that my doctor at the time was prescribing too much. I hate to call him a pill mill, but he might have been. And even though he was exonerated, that almost kind of bothers me that he was exonerated because now he can prescribe that stuff again.
Yeah.
And I never have really forgiven him in my heart. I saw him at a funeral about 5 years ago, and I shook his hand. That's the only time I've seen him since I gotten off of this stuff. And I almost wanted to beat his ass for getting me on it or saying something, but it was an inappropriate time because it was a funeral. It could have been my funeral, you know. It could have been my funeral. Could have been 10 years earlier because I could have overdosed on, not overdosed, but I could have mixed the wrong thing. You know, I could have been drinking 8 or 10 beers, which I shouldn't have been doing, but I could have been mixing alcohol and with an antidepressant and with a benzo, and I could have been 6 feet under.
Yeah, you're right. Could have very well been.
Anyway,
you got anything else you want to add to it?
No, I'm just here to say if you're taking this shit, you ain't alone, and it's not an easy thing. It will be, I'm not lying, it'll be one of the hardest things you've ever done in your life, but you can do it. But don't do it without some good help. And if you're some friggin' psychiatrist or some doctor who's doing something like, they're not micro tapering, they're not like cutting just a little bit, they just want to like give you, okay, we're going to give you one pill this week, and then next week we're going to cut you down to 3/4 of a pill every day. And then the following week we'll cut it down to a half a pill. That shit will not work. It will set you up for absolute failure. So don't go that route. You're going to have to micro taper, and you're going to have to do it slowly. And you do need some help. And you're going to need a good support system of friends that can kind of help you through it, because my wife did the best she could, but I didn't tell too many people, and I think that did not do our relationship any favors at the time. But anyway, just get a loving support group of people that a lot of people aren't going to understand. I mean, I didn't tell many people for 30 years I was even taking this stuff because there's such a stigma with taking this stuff anyway. But there's a lot of people like myself that was taking it that did the same thing. They don't tell their friends and that they take this stuff, but most people don't understand it. So it's just they don't understand panic attacks and agoraphobia and all the other phobias and the crazy things that come along with it.
I've had many people go, "What do you got to be depressed about?" It's like, you know what? Nothing really. And it's not like I just woke up today and was like, you know what? I want to be depressed.
No,
dude,
I'm right with you on that. That's one reason why I'm here talking to you right now, because we had talked about our mutual depression anyway, and we have that running similarity in our lives, and it's not like we chose that. And that's a whole nother friggin' topic. But I deal with depression every day, and it's always there, and it probably will always be in my life. I don't think there's really any cure for it. You just manage it. But
I've actually worked mine out, but that I think that's going to be another podcast.
Yeah. I'm always here to talk about a boatload of other crap that I'm either think I'm an expert on or I've dealt with. And
well, no, it's awesome. I'm glad you came back and took time out of your schedule to address this situation, which is pretty serious. I know I'm going to look more into it after this conversation, and I hope that people listening understand the severity of the situation as well.